Welcome back to the AI headlines on the AI Daily Brief. It's all the AI headline news you need in around 5 minutes. We kick off today with yet further efforts from the US government to limit China's access to advanced AI. For the last couple years, AI has been a centerpiece of the geopolitical tension between China and the USA. Since the end of 2022, the Biden administration has increasingly tightened export restrictions on advanced AI chips, while at the same time trying to create incentives to bring chip manufacturing back to the US. Now it appears that there is going to be a new front in that effort, with Reuters reporting that the White House has, quote, preliminary plans to place guardrails around the most advanced AI models like ChatGPT. Continuing, Reuters writes, the Commerce Department is considering a new regulatory push to restrict the export of proprietary or closed-source AI models. Any action, they write, would complement a series of measures put in place over the last 2 years to block the export of sophisticated AI chips to China in an effort to slow Beijing's development of the cutting-edge technology for military purposes. According to Reuters sources, any new export controls would likely target Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. Back in February, Microsoft said in a report that it had tracked hacking groups affiliated with the governments of China and North Korea, as well as Russian military intelligence, in trying to use their software to improve their hacking. In terms of determining which models would be advanced enough to be under these controls, it seems like it might be based on the computing power it took to train a model. Reuters again writes, the sources said the US may turn to a threshold contained in an AI executive order issued last October that is based on the amount of computing power it takes to train a model. When that level is reached, a developer must report its AI model development plans and provide test results to the Commerce Department. That computing power threshold could become the basis for determining what AI models would be subject to export restrictions. If used, it would likely only restrict the export of models that have yet to be released, since none are thought to have reached that threshold yet. According to the reporting, the agency is, quote, far from finalizing a rule proposal, but just the fact that they're considering it, Reuters argues, shows how seriously the US government is taking AI as a geopolitical concern. Now, of course, one of the challenges, if anything like this were to be imposed, is how much open source just complicates things. Especially given how close to state-of-the-art open source is getting, it could be a real challenge. To reiterate, this is currently just reporting from unnamed sources. When Reuters reached out, the Commerce Department declined to comment, while the Russian embassy in Washington did not respond. The Chinese embassy, though, you know they were going to get a comment in, describing it as a, quote, typical act of economic coercion and unilateral bullying which China firmly opposes. Meanwhile, in terms of things that have actually happened on this area, the US government has revoked licenses that allowed Qualcomm and Intel to supply chips to Huawei. The information writes, US lawmakers and officials have been alarmed by Huawei's ability to make advanced chips for smartphones despite years of Western sanctions. Republican lawmakers concerned about national security risks had been urging the US government to cancel licenses that allow US companies, including Qualcomm and Intel, to continue to sell chips to the Chinese company. In many ways, this is just a continuation of policies that were already started, but shows that in general, this is not just idle talk. Another part of the world that is impacted by the China-US battle around AI is, of course, the Middle East. For some time, the Middle East has been positioning itself as a literally middle player, maintaining relationships with both China and the US. However, the US has been increasingly uncomfortable about the Middle East relationship with China, seeing it as a way for China to getting around policies like the chip export controls. Recently, UAE company G42 explicitly started to move away from its relationships with China and took on a $1.5 billion minority investment from Microsoft, which was in part set up by the US Commerce Department. Now, Time magazine is reporting that the head of Saudi Arabia's new investment fund for AI said that if the US asked them to divest from China, they would. Amit Midha said, so far the requests have been to keep manufacturing and supply chains completely separate, but if the partnerships with China would become a problem for the US, we will divest. In another interview, Midha said, we are seeking trusted, secure partnerships in the US. The US is the #1 partner for us and the #1 market for AI, chips, and semiconductor industry. What's more, the US government is not just prohibiting China from using AI, or trying to, but also figuring out how to use AI itself. For example, the Department of Homeland Security is now piloting using AI to train officers who review applicants for refugee status. Basically, the central idea of this pilot is that it can be really difficult for immigration officers to do interviews with refugees who have experienced significant trauma. Said Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, refugee applicants, given the trauma that they have endured, are reticent to be forthcoming in describing that trauma. So then in the pilot, DHS is training the AI to act like refugees so that their officers can practice interviewing them. Meanwhile, while over the last few weeks, Microsoft has made a number of big investment announcements in Southeast Asia, they're now bringing it back home with an over $3 billion investment to build AI in Wisconsin. Today, President Biden will speak with Microsoft President Brad Smith in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin, to announce a $3.3 billion investment in a new data center there. In addition to the data center, Microsoft said that they're also investing in a new AI lab at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee to train employees to use AI. Said Brad Smith in an interview, we have a huge responsibility to help ensure this technology serves people. Part of that is ensuring that it works safely and remains under human control. But another part of it is really supporting and aiding the transition of the economy. So lots going on in the world of AI and geopolitics. But for now, that is going to do it for the headline section of the AI Daily Brief. Next up, the main episode where we talk all about what's going on with OpenAI, or really what isn't going on with OpenAI.